Well, hello, 7th graders. It's the final lesson for the French and Indian War. I'm Mr. Keelan, and I'm here to talk to you about the impact that the British victory had in the French and Indian War and how it shaped North America and really started leading towards the War for Independence, also known for as the American Revolution. So let's get right into it. Let's look at a map. So you might remember in lesson 1, we looked at this map of North America in 1700. Compare and contrast this map right here to your right to this one. And you'll see there's a lot of significant differences. You might notice that, hey, wait a minute. I don't see France in here anymore. I don't see the word French written anywhere. And that's right. The French no longer have any governing power in mainland North America, in the present day United States, after the French and Indian War. Now, we'll see during the Napoleonic ages, they'll get some of that land back, but as of right now, in 1763, after the end of the French and Indian War, they have nothing, nada, zilch, zip. You might notice now that the British control almost all of Canada, and they control everything that is east of the Mississippi River. So here's the original British colonies, and now they have claim to not just the Ohio River Valley, the Midwest, the the Southeast. They have a whole lot more turf that they can claim. Congratulations, England. Now you might be wondering yourself, Mr. Keelan, how did the Spanish get so much more territory? I don't remember the Spanish being in the war. And you're right. They weren't in the war. What? So what happens is, after fighting the war and winning the war, when they're negotiating the Treaty of Paris in 1763, the Spanish come and say, hey, listen, we now want half of the land that you got from France. And the British are like, no, we're the ones that fought a war for that. And like, well, you just fought a war. You have a lot of debt. Do you want to have another war with us? And the British are like, no. Well, in order to avoid that, you give us everything west of the Mississippi so we know our territory is protected. You get everything east. And essentially, the Spanish are able to get control of that land without firing a gun. Congratulations, Spain. They'll eventually again lose that to Napoleon, who then will sell it to us. We'll get to that in a future lesson. So there's a lot of change. And now with this makes the English the dominant force in North America. Even though the Spanish have claim to this area, they will not significantly start to colonize this area at all. And for the most part, it's just a colony in name only. They don't have a tremendous amount of control over the term as far as their power and resources. However, the British are going to start really using all this force in North America. With the war over in 1763, the British now gaining control of everything east of the Mississippi except for New Orleans and gaining control of most of Canada. They now dominate and are the most important political force in North America. The French are now gone. And we're going to see that as a result of this, with the British now being the dominant force, in order to win that war, a number of things had to happen, and that's going to have a lot of long-term effects on a relationship between the British and the American colonists. We talked about debt, and Britain borrows a lot of money to pay for the war, which worked. They won the war with paying borrowing all that money. They needed it. But if you lend somebody a lot of money, you're going to expect them to start paying you. And if they don't pay you, well, then you're going to be a bit agitado with them. You're going to be a bit angry with them. You might even go into conflict with them if they are not paying you all that they owe them, all that they owe you. And if you owe a lot of people money, that puts a lot of pressure on you. You now need to make more money to be able to pay that off. Let's talk about debt for a minute. Why do people lend money? Why would a bank lend somebody money? Is it out of kindness? Is it out of goodness? Or like, oh, this person looks like they could use a break. No. Nothing's for free. There's no free money. So if I'm a bank and I lend you money, let's say via a credit card, whenever you use a credit card, you're essentially borrowing money from a bank to make that purchase. The incentive to do that is the bank charges interest. So they add a percentage of the total amount that you own that money every day, every second. The amount of money that you owe goes up. So if I lend you $100, thanks to interest, you may end up paying me $150. So I make money off of the money that I lend you. And the longer it takes you to pay back your debt, the bigger that interest is going to grow. And the harder it's going to be to pay it overall. The more interest you have, the more money you're paying. The more money you're paying, the longer it takes. The longer it takes, the more interest you have. And it can be this cycle where you never pay off the debt, but you keep making payments toward it, but without reducing the amount because you're paying interest. That's a bad thing. That's a bad position to be in. Someday when you have credit cards, you don't want to have it to the point where you're only paying interest. That means that your debt never goes away. Same with you if you borrow money for a house with a mortgage or a car. You need to be able to start paying the principal down. Well, the British now need to start paying their principal down, or else people won't lend them money, or else they could go into conflict, so on and so forth. So they start pushing forward taxes. New taxes. And if you live in England after the French and Indian War, you start paying a lot of taxes because you have to pay for all their debt. That's how governments get money. They tax people. So in order to pay for our roads, in order to pay for our bridges, in order to pay for our army, our schools, postal service, all that comes in the form of taxes. But the taxes that our government collects is also to pay down our debts. So in England, there's a real important principle that you should have. If you're going to be taxed, you should have some say in the government. You should have some sort of vote on that tax. And that goes back to the Magna Carta, the idea that there should be some form of self-government. And before the French and Indian War, because the British allowed the colonies to kind of govern themselves, they didn't tax the colonies. They let them tax themselves and run themselves, but they didn't hammer them with taxes. They wanted to encourage them to grow. But now after the war, and after the Americans are the ones who benefit the most from the war, they expect the Americans to now start paying heavy taxes to pay off England's debts. And the Americans are like, wait a second. We're British, right? Yeah, says the government. And we have the rights of being British. Yeah. So shouldn't we have a say in the government? How can you tax us if we have no say in voting for the people who pass those taxes or voting on those tax laws? We need to have representation. We need to have representation in Parliament. We need to have people from America who are voting on those taxes if you're going to have the right to tax us. And the British say, no, we're not letting you be in Parliament. You left England. You're colonists. You're the children. We're the parents. And the parents are saying you have to pay these taxes. And the Americans say, nah, I shouldn't have to pay taxes unless I have a voice. If you're going to make me pay, you got to give me a say. And we're going to see that this anger of the Americans, that they're now being asked to pay taxes without getting representation, is going to grow. And the British resentment the Americans who are not willing to pay the taxes and resist it and are the ones who are benefiting from the war. The British are like, wait a minute. We weren't fighting to protect England. We were fighting to protect you. We were making sure that the French and the Indians didn't take over your land. You should be thankful to us and you should be paying us. And the Americans are like, whoa, we also fought in that war, and the only reason that you protected us is because it's your land. You want to get money off of us. So we're going to see that whole issue of taxation without representation becomes a big problem. And that issue would not come up if it wasn't for the debt. And they wouldn't have the debt if they didn't go to war. Another thing that's going to lead to a rise in tensions between the French and the Americans is the Proclamation of 1763. The Proclamation of 1763 is a law that forbids the colonists from crossing west of the Appalachian Mountains. Remember that the Native Americans who were fighting against the British are still there. The French may have left, but the natives are still there. And a leader of the natives, of the Huron, by the name of Pontiac, is starting to unite multiple tribes to fight together to resist the British. And remember, the British divide and conquer, get them to fight against one another. All of a sudden, they're uniting together. The British are like, whoa, 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 we can't have that. And plus, the British don't want to fight any war right now. They're trying to pay down their debt. They're trying to heal, recoup some of their losses from the war. So they want peace with the natives right now. So the king and the parliament negotiate a treaty with the natives living west of the Appalachians. You stop attacking British forces and British fortresses. You let us continue to build forts so we can defend and protect this territory. We will make sure that the American colonists don't move in. We'll draw a line. The none shall pass line. But a lot of the Americans are like, wait a minute. Like, the whole reason we fought the war was so we can move into the Ohio River Valley. And now you're saying we can't move into the territory even though we won a war. So then what was the point of the war? I want to be able to move in that land. I want to be able to make that money. I want to be able to have the freedom to pursue happiness and go and develop that land that I fought in a war to be able to control. And the British are like, nah, sorry. We don't want any more war. You can't cross the line. And if they do, Americans do cross the line, then the British government sends British soldiers to burn down their homes, to chase them off their property, to make sure that the natives aren't upset that the proclamation line is being violated. So, question for you. How did the political map of North America change after the end of the French and Indian War? And what does the expression no taxation without representation mean? I look forward to reading your answers. Post them on Google Classroom. That wraps up the French and Indian War. We'll now start